Hey, Tyler.
Hey, what's up?
What's going
How
on?
are you?
I'm doing well.
I
How are
think
you?
I saw you last week again.
Are you? Yes, you did. It was such a swell time.
Yeah, it was.
It
Really
was.
enjoyed myself. It was.
You know, these flights up to Boston aren't that bad. You could just, come in the studio and we could record this once a week.
That's true. Or we could just record a handful of them. I don't know if I could sit for that long.
Yeah, we would be.
I don't think it'd be fair to our guests. The first two may be good,
Yeah,
or maybe
and
like
the
the first and
energy
the
is
third
just
and the
dead.
fourth one. I'd just be like, yo, I can't anymore.
So for the record, we're not doing that on this episode. But there's no but. I don't know why I'm starting it. No, it's and today we have Hannah from Lawless Design, an interior designer who channels a lot of mindfulness, health, wellness, and relates it back to her firm and how design in general is more than just what something looks like.
Yeah, I looking through her page on Instagram, which is lawless_design. I know, Nick, you were kind of talking about her stories and the low lighting in her stories, but then kind of cruising through her Instagram and seeing her design and kind of how she approaches everything and how understated it is, and it is super calming. You know how you had said she's doing the lighting with her stories, and just looking through everything, every space is a space that we could live in as a family. It's very organic. It's not overly done. She does a really nice job.
She does, yeah. We also talk about photography and how important that is,
And how long it takes.
and also some of the secrets that go into getting the perfect photograph. So, how are you?
I'm good.
Are your hands
You sound
tired
good. You sound good.
from sanding?
My whole body's sore.
Anna, I know I've been following this project, but for those that have not been following this project, can you elaborate on what you and your husband, right,
Yeah.
are doing with this house?
I don't know. We're crazy.
You are crazy. I tell you this every week.
I know. So I think that to myself too. So basically, back in February, we bought a cabin, and we'd been looking for a while. And we originally were looking in New Hampshire because that's where we do a lot of hiking. And we just couldn't find anything. And then I started working on a project in Maine with these clients. And I was doing a site visit, and it was like 5 hours away. So Mike and I decided just to go up there for a weekend together. Mike's my husband. And we went up there and we fell in love with the area. And so 2 days later, Mike was on Zillow and he was like, hey, check out this cabin. We were like, oh, that's really cool. It had the acreage we really wanted. That was like the big thing. It was the location. And Mike went up the next day, and because he had work off, and yeah, we bought it. So.
But
now we're
that's just
renovating
the
it.
start of it. You're not just
I know.
hold on. You're
I
not
know.
just renovating it, Tyler. They
I think you mentioned this on the last
You need to follow.
podcast.
Yes, you need to follow her story. They are sanding the entire interior of this thing, and I mean, you guys are doing an amazing job, and I cannot give you enough props because I would never do that.
Yeah.
I there's no, even if I didn't have children, there's no way I would have enough in me to just like power. And I know it's Instagram, and there's probably maybe some choice words when it's not being filmed, but it looks like you guys are having the time of your life, and it's like this is so much work.
Yeah. I think because I was so naive to how much work it was, that's why we started doing it. Originally, our plan was to do it all. And then we started doing one of the bedrooms. We're like, okay, we're going to start in the 2 bedrooms. It's 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and there's a loft upstairs, which is basically like half the home. And the 2 bedrooms are quite small. And so we were like, all right, we're going to start there and see how it goes. Took forever. And we backtracked real quick. And we were like, all right, we're only going to do the bedrooms, and then we're going to leave the rest of the space. And then eventually one day we'll get back to it. And as we're doing the bedrooms, like each day, I'm just sitting there looking at these really orange, amber, shellacked walls. And Mike just knew, like, and I kept looking, I'm like, man, this is so bad. It's so bad. How am I gonna design around this and make it like actually look nice where people are going to want to stay here and not look like a cave? And I said something to him, probably like 2 weeks in, maybe even earlier, maybe a weekend. And I was like, hey, what do you think about doing all of this? And he's like, I knew we were going to. Like he knew instantly, like it wasn't even a thing. And then every week I just sit there, I'm like, wow, I really regret this. But then I start flipping through photos. I'm like, no, this was definitely the right decision. It's just a lot more work than I originally thought. So I give you guys a lot of props and respect for doing this every day because I could not.
I think I would have painted it.
Yeah.
Well, we tried. We actually tried.
You were gonna paint it?
Well, we tried everything. I mean,
Okay.
honestly, I was up for anything. We tried in the closet. So we started doing some test patching in the closet,
okay.
which then turned into test patching across one of the bedroom walls because we tested so many different things where, well, what would it look like if we just painted over the, it's not shellac, it's poly, but originally we thought it was shellac. And it just looked awful. Like there's a grainy texture to it. And it just would have looked sloppy if we just painted over it or did anything without
Yeah,
sanding.
it's a cabin. They just put poly on. They didn't sand it and put poly or sand between coats. They were like, get the thickest brush.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's probably just oil
Drip
poly.
this stuff on and just chase drips until it dries.
Well, it looks sprayed because everything when you take off the cabinets for the kitchen, they're bare. They don't have any of that. So I think they just took like some spray and just did it across.
Somebody probably came in with like a Wagner that they got from Depot, and we're just like, all right, let it rip.
It's rough because we have to go over it 4 times. So we went over
sanding it.
Yeah. So you do 40, then 80, then 120, and then you have to wipe it with the water and do I forget what it's called.
The water pop.
The water pop for the Rubio, and then you have to go over it with
you're
the
putting
220.
Rubio. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, because if you were finishing
Mike's
it with
gonna have the
something else, you could
buffish
go to like
shoulders.
80 and be fine.
I'm honestly like I like my upper body is just always so sore now. Like every day throughout the week because
Did you guys end up
sanders.
upgrading your sanders?
We did.
You know that.
Yeah.
You know that once you sand off that poly and the Rubio goes on, within like 2 years, it'll orange again. Just kidding. Did you see her face?
I'd just be done. I'd be like, I'm out.
Abort! Put it on the market. We are done.
We're done.
I wish everyone could have just seen her face.
No, we're gonna be done. I keep saying, I feel like every weekend I'm like, guys, last weekend sanding, but this is actually our last weekend coming up. We just have a little bit more of a ceiling and then like a couple, like one wall. So I'm like, thank God.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, I think originally I was like, oh, once we're done sanding, like that's the hard part. But the Rubio is actually pretty intensive to put on too with everything.
Because you're going like a brown, right? Like a chocolate?
We're doing 2 different tones. So originally, I've had so many iterations of this cabin. Originally, I wanted to pickle the walls, but I couldn't get the right chartreuse. Like, I couldn't get the right look that I wanted for it because it was like, it's old wood. It's not new. And I wanted more of like the texture coming through with more of like a reclaimed wood. And it obviously you can't do that when you're sanding it. So then we started moving into, we were going to stain the whole thing. And then there's so little windows in the space. And even the south side wall where the kitchen and the living room are, it's this great opportunity to put in a huge window, but we're not going to do that right now, given the time. So it's really dark in there and we're going to Rubio it. I came up with a mixture of a couple of different colors. We're going to Rubio most of the walls and the ceiling. And then the exterior 3 walls in the living room and kitchen, we're just going to do in one of the Rubios. I think it's like a super white, and then we're doing it with their pre-easy color, and we're doing the Nordic white. So it's a little bit more opaque than having a transparent, because Mike still wanted to see some of the graining in the wood. That was his big thing, is he doesn't like painted wood. He wants some of the graining to show through with the cabin.
Maybe you guys shouldn't have bought a cabin.
He loves that look. I like cabins. Log cabins weren't necessarily something that I really thought about, especially for like the aesthetic I really like. But again, we loved the location, and
Is it a
I
true
think it's
log
fun.
cabin?
It is,
It
yeah,
is. So you're gonna do
yeah,
the outside?
yeah. Um, that's the other endeavor. We're gonna do that next year. Originally, we were going to have someone else do it, but
Mm,
just with people's timing and
yeah.
logistics, I think it's also hard because we don't know people up there
Right.
to work with, and so finding reputable people can always be tough. And Mike's definitely the kind of person that it has to be done right. And if you get someone up there, I mean, obviously if it has to be done right, but he's kind of the person that's like, oh, I don't want anyone else doing this because they're not going to do it the right way. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. I think I told you this, but my wife and I bought a cabin like on impulse. It was at the
Yeah.
beginning of COVID, and she had come across this log cabin that her grandmother had a house on the same street. And she's like, "Oh my God, that's so weird. Let's go look at it."
Oh, cool.
And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem. Like, we're not doing anything else. We're trapped in the house." And we drove up there, and the realtor was like, "I have to meet you because you can't go there alone." And we go there, and they open the door, and like they had like set up the wood stove. I'm like, "Oh man,
Yeah, they got you.
yeah, this thing's pretty cool." And Meg's like, "All right, well, I really appreciate it. Sorry to waste your time." And I was like, "How much?" And he was like, "What?" No, and my wife's like, "We're buying this?" I'm like, "Meg, I think we have to." She's like, "We just came up to look at it."
Hmm.
And he was like, "Well," and it was on the market for like 7 months or something like that at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
And that he was like, "Well," he was like, "Yeah, you can put an offer in." And I put an offer in, like, I think it was like 5 grand under asking. Like, so
Hmm.
it basically, like, why wouldn't they take it? Because it's been
Yeah.
on the market so long. And I got a call back, and they were like, "There's 3 other offers this weekend." and
Whoa.
and I was like, all right, I'll pay. It was like an escalation clause. I was like, I'll pay $3,000 more than anyone else.
Hmm.
And they called back and they're like, it's yours. And Meg's like, I can't believe we have a cabin. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, neither can I. But it's the same thing. It's like you go up there and it's all amber on the inside. The outside has like whoever owned it in between the original owner and us didn't take care of the outside. So
Yep.
I look at it and I'm like, I want to stain it, but I also just kind of don't mind that it looks kind of like a crappy cabin. And then you walk in and it's like, oh wow, this is actually pretty cute.
Yeah.
But I was the same way with trying to find people to work up there, and a friend of mine has a house close by, and I've been hiring local people to do different things. Like the roof had to be clean, so I hired someone.
Hmm.
I had a bunch of trees cut down so we could have a backyard and landscape. I've never met any of them.
Yeah.
None of them. It's like
Yeah.
we had someone go there for like pest, like to deal with the pests inside. It's good. Everyone likes dogs.
Remember when you went and bought or you went and rented that piece of equipment and then tore up like your whole backyard, and I'm pretty sure you broke the equipment.
I did. Well,
And
the
we're
equipment
not like
broke.
even close to being done.
That yes, I rented an excavator because I was like,
Yeah.
we need a backyard, and we
Yeah.
had no backyard. So it was like an entire. It was like the week. I think it was the week of July 4th, and I rented it for the whole week, and I just sat out back like grubbing the lot, and I had spent. I mean, it probably cost me. I think it was $1,000 to rent the thing for the week, and I mean, I got a lot of work done, but I certainly. I called someone when my week was up. I was like, hey. I found a landscaper. I was like, "Would you be interested in doing it?" He called me. I was back in Boston. He was like, "Yep, I'm here. I'm looking at it. I can get this done in 2 days." I'm like, 2 days? What the
That's
hell?
amazing.
And
That's unheard of.
Yeah, and he was like, I was like, "Go ahead." He was like, "Am I good to start today?" I'm like, "Go for it." And we went up there like 2 weeks later, and we had a backyard. And it was like I think it was honestly like maybe $1,500 or something like that. It was like so incredibly inexpensive compared to the $1,000 I spent on with the excavator. And I'd asked him, I'm like, hey, do you think like I helped? Like I just want to know like the $1,000 in the week of my life I spent like grubbing the backyard helped. And it was like I couldn't get a straight answer. He was probably
Yeah.
like, I mean, like you actually made my job worse, but it's all good.
That's
Maybe a
our
little.
next thing we have to do. The foundation is exposed a lot on our house, and so we have to buy dirt. And I'm like, what? We really have to buy dirt like for our house? But the road that our street is on is like a tiny little bridge that goes over, and it's technically like mud season. And so we have to wait until it dries out. And so I think it's like May 1st, you have to wait until
Mm.
you can get a bigger truck onto it. But yeah, the cabin's cool. I think the tough thing is we're trying to do it in such a short time period too. I think that's why it's such grueling work because we want to rent it out by summer.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of it's a lot, but I mean it's fun too. And this is also the third house we've worked on together. So it's fun working together. I feel like we have a good flow and we're good at working with one another.
That's funny.
Oh my God, I would kill my wife. There's no
Well,
way.
we'll get Mike on the podcast and Mike will probably say the same thing you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you see any swirls on the walls, those are the boards that I sanded, because Mike is like very meticulous with like the light going and everything.
Mm.
And I'm like, I just rub my hand over. I'm like, feels good. Like we're good to
Yeah.
go. And then Mike shines a light on it and there's like all these little swirls on it. Like, oh, jeez.
That's funny. I mean,
Yeah, I can't work with my wife for that long. I just like end up getting frustrating and then resenting her for something, and I'm like, I'll just do it myself. It's just easier. Especially
Yeah.
add kids to the mix now, and I'm ready to kill someone.
We
It's
don't
just-
have
it-
kids yet, so I think that's part of it.
Don't do it if you want to work on your house.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, there's just, I mean, I feel like we've talked about kids a lot on this podcast recently, but they add such a, like, you have to do something with them. Like, while if
Yeah.
you want to work on something, like, that's the hardest part. And, when
Teach him to sand.
not when they're, let's talk about under 5 years old.
Whatever. Get a mask. Get a mask.
I'm not worried about their lungs. I'm worried about the fact that they can't hold a sander.
Strap it to him.
Oh my gosh, I know. We have our dog and he's a cattle dog Australian Shepherd, and even with him he's so active and normally like going for walks every day and doing everything, and so that's even
He just sits there as like, I've been hearing this buzzing noise for 8 hours. I need to go for a walk, guys.
oh, he hates it. He gets so mad. Like he's just
Yeah.
like he'll come in and like start whining, and yeah, he's just not a good time for him.
Guys, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. If you guys want to learn more about Duration Molding and Millwork, it's durationmillwork.com. Make sure you check them out on Instagram. They are the manufacturer of custom polyash. They are doing siding, molding, custom millwork, short turnaround times. I've talked about it before, but we have a beautiful home that we're building in Needham, Massachusetts, and all of the exterior trim, the siding, that's all going to be a true exterior product or polyash product that is we're going to work with the team over at Duration. We got some brackets at Steve Teak Design that are massive, but we're going to be in that shop drawing process, and they've communicated that it's just a few short weeks from approved shops to on my doorstep.
Yeah, what I always think about, I was actually just in my shop the other day and I was talking to somebody about their product, and what blew my mind the first time I ever used it was nailing it in the assembly of it and how you can put screws, fasteners, there's no grain to it. So the nails aren't blowing out, they're not curling, they're not hitting something, and you can nail it very close to the end and it doesn't split.
Dude, it's wild.
Yeah, and it's so nice to be able to install like exterior and be able to nail in certain places with wood or plastic that you wouldn't be able to. So just something to note that kind of came to my mind.
Yeah. This podcast is also brought to you by Reno Run. They are in Montreal, Toronto, Boston, Chicago, Philly, and Washington, D.C. Building materials exactly where you need them. Oversized orders or small orders, they got you. We've been using them for last-minute deliveries for months now, saving my team time from leaving the job site, going to a box store, picking up a box of screws, and getting back there. But we're also exploring on some of our larger projects and our new builds on getting some of the bigger materials ordered and bigger packages. They are outfitting. I mean, I literally see their vans everywhere. I'd say it's between them and Amazon taking over the street and probably buying all the sprinters that I'm trying to buy for my company.
Yeah, it's I know we've said it before, but it's such a great business model, and I don't think that it matters if you're a bigger company or a smaller company, you know, even a 1-2 man crew where it's like, I need people, or me personally, like I need to be on the job. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm tired at the end of the day. And I don't know, when I was 23 to 33, I didn't mind before work, after work, stopping and making all those extra trips. I get done work now and I want to go home, and it's nice to be able to call them if I need something dropped off and not have to either elongate my day or start my day early or leave the job.
Yeah.
So you could be a big company, small company. I think that there's a place for them with each.
Yeah, and if you want free delivery, podcast.rentalrun.com/Modern Craftsman.
I've used it like 6 times already. I just tell them a different name every time.
Same
I'm
address.
only kidding.
Wrong, but
I don't
different
do
name.
that.
Yeah, don't do that. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool high-performance, fire-resistant soundproofing stone wall insulation for your interior and exterior walls, not only helping you overachieve local codes and building standards, but getting ahead of future codes. You guys have seen it on our project down in Rhode Island, and now you're going to see it on our project in Needham, where we are working with their technical team. We had decided to join the R-Class program, which is, a team of residential building pros. We were able to get samples. We're getting potential rebate savings. We're getting technical support, and they're going to help us engineer this house to, like they say, overachieve local codes and building standards, but also just build a better home with using better products.
I think what's neat, Nick, and I know that you've ran into it with them. Where I am, there's not a huge push for energy efficient homes, and on remodels, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to integrate these ornate, intricate details to kind of seal up a space that takes a lot of time and money when the rest of the house is old. We bring in a product like Rockwool and we're using it, and a lot of times inspectors may or might not have seen the product, understand the product other than fire blocking or, an addition where you're putting on the exterior insulation. They will help you with whatever approvals and paperwork and working with the township or the city to develop, to get these things signed off on for their product. I know that you have crazy details on this house that you're doing in Providence that, you need submittals and approvals done, and they're working with you guys to get all of those details sorted out so you don't have issues with the building department.
Yeah, and that's the best part about being part of that R-Class program. If you guys want to join that program, it's rockwool.com/R-Class. That's R as in, what is it in Rockwool?
Rhino.
I'm going to go with Rockwool.
Oh, man.
This podcast is brought to you by Upstate Merch, quality-focused screen printing, embroidery, and graphic design shop located in Whitney Point, New York. Over 12 years, Upstate Merch prides themselves on using only the best materials and American-made tools to get your job done. Whether you're looking for giveaway shirts, embroidered hats, safety wear, polos, hoodies, or you're looking for top-quality garments to outfit your team, Upstate Merch has it covered. If you guys want to check them out, upstatemerch.com. They are not only a supporter here on the podcast, but they also provide all of our merch for the Modern Craftsman. Tyler, I know they oftentimes, or I think they're providing the merch for you guys. They've provided merch for us at NS Builders. They are super easy to work with.
Yeah, I love Dylan. It's a young company. There's a lot of cool guys and girls there. They like music, motorcycles. They're relatively local. I just feel like it's a young company,
Yeah.
And I don't know. Screen printing isn't like the type of thing where you're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I want to get in screen printing.
Oh, they make it look cool.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah.
And it's like a young, energetic company. And if that's kind of what you're into and you want to get some merch for yourself, some apparel for yourself and your customers, your employees, whatever, give them a shout. And how much? 10%?
You can get 10% off if you mention the Modern Craftsman when you email them at...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you mention it like 6 times, then you'll get 60% off.
You're gonna get us in trouble.
That's like sunscreen. If you put on like SPF 30 3 times,
That
it's basically
only works
SPF
if it dries
90.
first, Tyler. You have to let it dry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then maybe that 60% isn't accurate, but you can get 10% off by emailing
print@upstatemerch.com, or check them out on Instagram as well as their website, upstatemerch.com.
It sounds really fun and super romantic to like, we're going to buy a cabin in Maine and we're going to renovate it and then rent it out. And then as soon as you get into it, you're like, this is not as cool as it sounded.
Yeah.
They should make a movie about this, like a Hallmark movie.
I think they probably have.
Yeah, there's got to be something out there. I mean, I think too, like, yeah, because you're like, and I remember the first week we were there, we just did some cleaning and light work, and we'd wrap up by like 6 or something like that, and we told each other, we're like, no work here. Like, we're not doing any like work for us. And then it's like, we finish, we're doing like 12-hour days. And then after, I'm like on my laptop, like trying to respond to emails and like go through work. And it's just totally different. But I think this house, the first house we did together, was definitely the hardest.
Why?
It was Mike's house. We met and he was renovating it, and he had only done the bathroom, and it was a big fixer-upper. It was a lot of work, and he was living, it was in Delaware. That's where we met when I lived in Philly, and he was down there, and we met the week I was leaving, and then we did long distance for a few years. And so on the weekends we would go back and forth, and I would go down there and help him with the house every few weeks or whatever. And that house was tough.
Delaware's lovely.
Yeah, I didn't even know where it was on the map before I moved there.
It's funny because when you drive through Delaware from where I'm in Jersey, and when you drive through Delaware going south, you're only in it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
like
it's small. I mean,
if you were to drive it north to south, it's a long drive, but like where it is on the coast, to just like if you're driving south, you're seriously in Delaware for like a few miles.
Yeah, he lived in Wilmington, and that's
Okay.
where when I lived in Philly, the office that I worked in was in Wilmington. Kind of a random area.
Where did you live in Philly?
Queen Village.
Oh, okay. I have a buddy who just sold his place there.
Yeah.
How did you end up there?
On a whim. When I graduated college, I was looking for jobs, and I wanted to live in New York. That was like the big thing. I had always wanted to live in New York, and it was like 2014, so it was like still like the recession was like kind of like still just coming out and with building, and I was applying for jobs, and the amount that I was getting offered was just like nothing. Like I couldn't have lived there, and my brother lives there, and he's my best friend, so I wanted to be with like near him. And he just made a comment, like I was like, hey, I got a job offer, and I told him how much it was, and he just started laughing, and he was like, what are you doing? Like, you are not gonna be able to live here. You're gonna have to get another job. And I was just like, that's fine. I don't care. Like, I'll work another job if I can live in New York. And then I started doing the expenses out with my dad, and my dad had an Excel sheet out, and we're going through everything. It was like red and everything, and my brother was just like, you're gonna be able to enjoy New York more if you don't live here.
Yeah.
And I got in a job offer in Boston, and random, but I got a job offer from an engineering firm, and they wanted me to be a CAD person. And my dad is like, that's a great company. My dad's in the industry, and he was like, that's a great company. Like, that would be awesome. Gets your foot in the door. I'm like, Dad, I didn't even go to school for any of this. Like, why am I going to be a draftsman? And he was like, well, what other jobs do you have lined up? And my family is really close. It's just my parents and my brother and I, and we're all really close. And my parents had always said, by September 1st, once you graduate college, you have to be out. Like, you're off the books, you're out of the house, you have to find a job. And it was like the middle of summer, and he was like, where are you gonna go? And I had gone on LinkedIn, and I had found this company in Delaware, and they were a small company, but I saw that they were growing. And it was one of those like quick apply things. And I had known Delaware only because I had worked on a project in college for one of my internships. And so I told him, and I was like, my dad and I are really competitive, and I had told him, he's like, oh, well, what are you going to do if you're not going to work for this company? I was like, well, there's a company in Delaware that I'm going to apply to. And I think I had gotten an interview offer by that point. And my dad started laughing and he was like, you're not going to go to Delaware. And it was one of those things like, now I have to like prove it. So I went down, did a couple interviews with them and I got the job. And right when I got the job offer, I'm like, crap, I don't want to move here.
It's tax free.
I know. So I moved to Delaware and I lived there for 4 months. And one of my friends who I didn't know anyone down there, I didn't know anyone in Philly. And I really just moved for the job. And one of my friends that I made while working there, her and her husband lived in Philly. And I went to go visit them. I was like, why don't I live here? It's like 30 minutes away. This is so much better. And ended up just living in Philly for a while I worked there. So it's a cool city.
Yeah, we had a few friends after college who ended up working in Wilmington, who would live on the Jersey side and then Philly and commute there just because it's close.
It was like 30 minutes. It's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Because you're reverse traffic.
And I'm sorry to the people who live in Delaware, but nobody really wants to live there.
There goes our following.
It is tax free.
Yeah.
You have that.
Yeah.
So Mike lived in Delaware? Did I hear that right?
He did. He grew up in Pennsylvania, and then went to Drexel. And so when he graduated, he's an engineer. He graduated from the engineering department or whatever there, and moved to Wilmington and started working for a company there. And then that's how we met.
So
neat.
Good.
No, I went to Drexel. That's
where
my wife and I met.
I was
Oh,
gonna
cool.
say I thought you went to Drexel.
Yeah. I didn't live there. I didn't live there for long though. It was the same thing. I lived in West Philly for a little bit and then moved out. My wife had graduated sooner, moved in together and ended up commuting into Philly. But Drexel was not that nice then. This was probably like 2010, 11,
That's
I think.
when he was there. Yeah. He was 13.
Yeah, and I feel like the campus is a lot nicer now, but when we were there, it was not very nice.
It's built up a lot. Every time I would go down there when we were dating, and I would go visit him, every time I swear Philly was like coming up with a new building or Drexel had a new thing, and they have some new. Mike knows more about it, but there's like I think they want to do something with the city, and I think it's like $1 billion road thing or whatever from Drexel into the center city.
Yeah. Yeah, because Penn's there, University of the Sciences are there. So I know they'd built up a lot of that, and then it was starting to creep north some, and then west. And it's coming around. I feel like even Queen Village wasn't super nice, 10, 15 years ago. And then like South Philly is so built up now, and there's a ton of townhouses and condos in Queen Village that, it's close to Society Hill. Mm-hmm. That entire neighborhood has come around in the past 10, 15 years. I guess it's just like anything else.
Yeah.
So you had worked for this company down in Wilmington. And you and Mike had met. Yeah. When did you start your company?
So funny. So Mike and I, when we went on our first date, I had actually moved up to Massachusetts by that point because we met the week I had gotten another job offer up in Massachusetts and I was moving, and he came up to visit me, and I had always wanted a business. I went to Endicott and I got a minor in business, and that's what I always knew. But I always kind of thought that you had to work your way up for like 20, 30 years in a company. And I feel like entrepreneurship wasn't super popular back then. Even like 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't as popular.
I think social media
now
has uncovered the ability to be your own boss, a lot.
That's really true. Yeah. And when we were on our first date, Mike was talking about how he had his business, and it was like he worked for a company full time and he had his business on the side. I was like, what do you mean? He was like 25. And I was like, what do you mean you have a business? And he was like, yeah, it's easy. You just go online and you file some forms and you have a business. Or it's obviously a little harder than that. And so I think then I waited like a year, and I filed for my company in 2016, at the end of 2016. And then for another year, I didn't do anything with it, except I just built up my website, and I built up, I did like I did like fake projects essentially, where I would just do like mock-up of homes and
Mm-hmm.
renderings, and I would just like put them on my website because I didn't have a portfolio. I
Right.
couldn't use the work that I was using for the other companies. A lot of them were proprietary with like commercial design work. And so I kind of just had to like, and I wanted to get more into residential at that point. I'd never done residential, except for some e-design. And so I kind of had to like, you know, just show clients, here's some renderings and here's some styles that I like, you know. So
I think that's super smart. I mean, I feel like that question comes up a lot too. It's like, how do you start if you don't have a portfolio? How do you show your work? And it's like, you know, that what you're doing by sharing renderings and sharing design and like, you know, I don't know if you said the word fake it, but like you're not really faking it. You're actually doing the work. You're showcasing your aesthetic. You're showcasing your ability to put together a space. Yes, you know, maybe no one paid you for it, but that's not the point. The point is that, you know, I don't cross check like, hey, you know, who paid you to do work versus who are you doing it for free. It's like, no, I want to see what your work looks like.
Yeah.
And then decide based on like, do I think the aesthetic works?
yeah.
So
I mean, for us, Nick, that's the same thing. Like when we bought our first house, it was like, I want to try and do things in here
right.
that I could bring to a job or photograph. And obviously things change and you progress, but that was like a huge portfolio builder and kind of learning my way through the ropes with the first house. And otherwise, like, what are you going to do? You don't have the customer base to be doing the type of work you want to be doing. You don't know how to price it. You don't know how long it's going to take. So you kind of start there and make a little bit of crap up as you go.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing too that was beneficial of working with Mike on his house is I was designing it, and then I got to use that for my portfolio too. And everything in there was custom because it was a craftsman home, and Mike wanted to stay true to the craftsman. So all the doors had to be handmade, all the window trim, everything had to be handmade. And it was kind of fun to just do random stuff and you know, things that I wouldn't get to do on a client project. And so for that, I think when I started doing the renderings, I also started a blog, and I would just like blog about like, oh, here are some different things that I like, and you know, just different topics. So I didn't necessarily have the portfolio that I would now, but clients saw, oh, she's really into this kind of stuff, and she's really into this, and oh, here's some stuff that she's drawn up, and I, you know, I can see her vision for the space.
Mm-hmm. Are you still blogging?
I I have a blog. I actually don't write it anymore. One of the girls on my team does.
Yeah.
So once a week we send something out and we collaborate on that.
And that's successful, right?
It is. Yeah, I think it's good. Again, because a lot of times, I think especially now that projects are taking so much longer,
Mm-hmm.
it's good for clients to just have stuff that they get to look at, and I feel like they get invested. And it also, I think what's nice about the blog is I'm also able to share things like recipes that I'm not going to put on my Instagram essentially,
Mm-hmm.
but those are things, or like different like health things or wellness, because those are things that are really important to me. And I feel like you connect with clients outside of the work that you're doing. And that's where I feel like I get a lot of clients like, oh, I saw that you're really interested in this, and that really resonated with me. And you're able to click on, hiking or cooking or things like that.
Well, I think that's what's really drawn me to, bring you on the podcast here is like that, how you've connected everything in your life back to design. And you talk about it on your website, you talk about it on social media, is like wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to uncover that and talk about that because, I think what you just said is really important, where it's like you can be so immersed in design. You can be so business focused on design. And it's all about design and colors and textures and finishes and the way the space looks and works. But what about life and how design impacts life? And I'm just going to commend you. Like, you do a really good job, aesthetically, like with your brand. Like, even like you've been posting on your, I pay attention, obviously. But even your stories, like you have that, I forget what filter you've been using, but it's like the low light.
Yeah.
And when I come across, like, I don't even have to know, like, I know immediately it's yours, but it puts me in this like mindset of calm. And that, and when I look at your projects, like you can tell that, like, I don't want to say earthy or like granola. Like I don't think those are the right words, but the point is like there is this deeper connection beyond just design and like loud and proud design. It's more about like, what does this space do for me? How does this make me feel, and so what, like, has it always been centered around wellness?
I feel like it, not initially. I had like two big passions, like design and then health and wellness. And when I was out of college, I started also doing like personal training on the side. So I did e-design on the side, and then I also did personal training on the side because I really loved like working out and fitness and health, but I didn't want to do it as a full-time job. It was kind of just like a passion thing. And so I did that for a while, and I always wondered how do you fuse the two together? And then I just started, I feel like it just kind of eventually evolved. Like you start just thinking about the different materials and the different elements that you put into your home and how they correlate with you and your life, and just using like natural woods and plants and just different materials like that. And I'm really big into the outdoors. And so bringing the outdoors in and kind of having your spaces evoke that. And I think it's just naturally progressed over the years into something where I've just started adding more elements and kind of just learning more and adding more.
Yeah, it's nice to see too, because I think that everything the past few years has been so white and so sterile. And you see a lot of the same stuff over and over. And it's nice to bring some of that, like you said, bringing the outside in. And you can really feel that. I was looking on your Instagram at a lot of your design, and you can definitely feel that. It doesn't feel overly sterile. Everything has like a warmth to it and a very natural feel to it. And it's not like your design work isn't overly done.
Yeah, thank you.
It's like a lot of it's like understated and works really well.
That's a big goal of mine, because I think when a lot of clients think about interior design, they think like magazines or like the plastic covers over everything, and it's not homey. And I think I think what's nice about being a designer is I appreciate so many different styles, and I love so many different things. Might not necessarily be something that I would do, but I appreciate them and I know that they're beautiful. But for the work that I do with my clients, the biggest thing is like, I just want it to feel like home and feel this warmth and coziness and really just feel drawn into it. And I think, yeah, like over the last couple of years, people have just realized like your home is so important. And I feel like maybe a couple of years ago, people didn't realize that. A lot of times people weren't even home that often. When I worked for a firm, like I was never home, and now I think people just realize that our home is just more vital.
I think it's important. Something that I'd actually like to do more, and I've kind of pushed to the side, is having design done so that you can live in that space, where it's not like you said, where I can't go in and use this space where it's almost unlivable, where it's going to get messed up or it's going to get dirty, or there's a lot of harsh edges where it's not a livable space. I look at a lot of your stuff and I'm like, our kids could bang that up and it would still kind of had the same design sense and still feel the same way. It could be lived in, and it wouldn't really overall affect how that space feels, which is nice. I don't think a lot of people design that way. They design and try and lay this golden egg that's going to photograph well and be on a magazine cover, and then as soon as you start living in it, it looks like crap.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too. There's a lot of pressure. I think when clients start working with a designer, like, oh, I have to have a magazine ready house. I'm like, no one has that magazine ready house, actually. Like, if you look at what goes into these photo shoots, I mean, photo shoots are thousands of dollars, because you have to hire the photographer, you have to bring in extra props and florals and all this extra pieces, because the scale, what looks good in person doesn't always photograph well because of the scale of an element and the angle of something. Right. And so there's always these like little fine tunings, or we'll prop up a chair with books to make it a little bit more prominent because you can't see, like, these are things that you don't necessarily see when you see the end photo.
Right.
And it's
But it's
kind of funny when
funny.
clients say that.
So,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but
No?
I remember specifically being on a project that they propped a table up behind a couch with books
Yeah.
by like 12 inches.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah, it's a
what?
lot.
I'm like, what? That's not gonna look right. And then you see the photo, and it's like, it actually looks right.
Yeah.
And or they always bring the artwork and someone holds it and then they Photoshop the person out of it.
Yep.
It's like, like I've seen Michael Lee do that, and he posted on his Instagram stories and things like that. I'm like, man, like, but you're paying thousands of dollars for really well done photos, because not only are you trying to capture the space, but you're also trying to prep the space to be at its glory.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
and at its glory isn't always what it looks like on a daily basis. I've
Yeah.
always wanted to start a like an Instagram page where it's like the same like the space when it's photographed, and then have like a swipe and like what it looks like every day.
It's like
And it's like,
Instagram versus reality.
yeah, exactly, where it's like bathroom when it's photographed, bathroom with toothpaste on the mirror. It's like, because it looks, and it's deceiving, and this is another topic that we can go down at some point, but I think that's why I'm so drawn to video, because like video is similar, like
Mm.
you still prep the space, but you get a sense of how it's lived in and how the space is utilized and used, and it's not, and you get a sense of like scale. You do get the sense of scale, where photography, I think that photography is enormously valuable. It's a big part of what we do, but but I feel like there's less opportunity to doll up a video, because
Hmm.
you're almost like walking through the space and experiencing what the light truly does, when it shines through the window, and what the wind does, when it blows across the curtains, and and what it feels like to walk around that island, that might be in the center of the room, and things like that.
Yeah, that's always something I've wanted to start doing is I like do more videography for projects and do a walkthrough. I think would be really cool and interesting. The photographer that I've worked with uh, every year since I started, Joya West, she does an amazing job with the photos. And I feel like that is so vital when you're a designer, is getting
Yeah.
the right photographer, because you want to have your projects feel this continuity and feel consistent across with
Hmm.
everything. Not everything has to look the same, but having the same kind of like lighting and
Yeah.
editing, I think is really important to see that consistency. And it's funny because like when you go to a photo shoot, there's so much pressure on that day or 2 days, whatever, of a photo shoot, because even depending on the weather, that can change the entire look of
Hmm.
a photo. And depending on what type of day you're going, especially in the winter when you're doing, I hate doing photo shoots in the winter because you have like this like 7, 8 hour block and it's really tight and you're kind of like rushing, not rushing, but like you're having to like move through the space. And like, I think it can make for really cool photos when you get like the end of the day light and it's really striking and it comes in and it can make a difference. But yeah, the pressure of photo shoots is never fun.
I'm always amazed at how long it takes to photograph something, where I think to myself, oh, this is going to be real quick. And then I leave and come back. I'm like, wait, you guys are only here.
Yeah.
It's
And it's
how
like
this,
one room.
yeah. And it
Yeah.
takes so long. And I guess that also complicates things where, Nick, you're looking to kind of create or document a space through video. And I think in order to do that well and really create that mood, it would require so much time and effort, because you really can't create the feel that you want 360 degrees. It still has to be one space where you're setting up lighting and blocking lighting to kind of create the mood that you're trying to look at, that like mood that you're trying to achieve through the video. It's very similar to the photography. You can still only do a certain portion at a time in order to get that. I guess with video you do, like you said, you are getting somewhat of a more raw experience of that, because it's impossible to kind of create exactly what you want in that entire space from every angle in one shot. it's everything's just always going to be changing. You think when you go to shoot something and how much effort goes into setting up lighting, and then they're like, no, you know what, we need to move this one light over here, it's casting a shadow right here, and then it takes 15 minutes to do that, and I'm like, I don't even know if that was worth it to go and move that. And then you see it and you're like, all right, yeah, it totally was.
It's funny because clients, when I'm like, oh, we're going to be there for the whole day shooting, and they're kind of like, what? Like, I feel like they don't realize it. And I'll tell them, like, it takes that, like, from a half an hour to an hour to get one photo.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that because you're changing some of the angles or maneuvering things. And most of the time, we don't have clients at the home when we're doing the photo shoot, but there's always the cases where some of them are, and they'll see us, and Joy will like, take a photo, and we'll look at it on her laptop and her screen, and then we'll be like, oh, this needs to be moved over like just slightly, and we'll move something like an inch, and we'll be like, oh, that looks so much better. And they're like, okay, these girls are crazy. Like,
but it also takes
definitely,
longer.
I've witnessed that.
Oh yeah, because it's awkward to move something, or maybe they added something that wasn't in the design.
Yeah.
But I mean, our clients are awesome. Like, I'll tell them, I'll be like, hey, this isn't going to photograph well, or do you mind? Like, I had this other vision for this, and they're totally fine with it as long as you tell them up front.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're going to take all your decorations out because they suck.
Well, I mean, we take out family photos, anything personal like that. You don't want, someone's family in your portfolio, stuff like that.
You make a good point about, the same photographer, and we've worked with a lot of really talented photographers, and it's, at the end of the day, like, outside looking in, I think your photographer does a really good job tying your aesthetic to the photography that it is. And for us, being on the builder side, I think more so now, but a lot of times in the industry, we don't have the choice of who we're using with the photographer. Mm-hmm. The interior designer, the architect is like, hey, so and so is gonna photograph it. Do you want to buy the rights to the photos? Now I'm usually getting ahead of it, where it's like, I know who I want to photograph this. But when you find that right photographer, that consistency behind, like, hey, they get me, they get the aesthetic, mm-hmm. and they're capturing it in a way that, it aligns with how I see the space. Where it's like, I look at photos all day, and it's, and when we get a project photograph, I'm like, these are beautiful. It's just not how I see the space. I see the space in a different way, whether it's the lighting, whether it's the way, the angle of the room. And oftentimes I come on site because I try to dictate it, but I've noticed that every time I do, like, I derail it. And it's like the photographer is trying to step outside of their shoes and into mine. And then it's like they're not doing their job 10 out of 10 because they're not approaching it the way that they normally would. And it's anytime I try to guide, like, we had, you talk about wintertime. There was this really particular shot on this job that the sun beamed through the skylight in this way that was super, like, geometric. And I was like, we have to hit that. I want that light to, like, cross and hit dead center on this corner. And when we end up shooting it, the sun was too low. I mean, sun was too high. Or it was in, I don't know where it was. All I know is all day they waited for it and it never hit. And it was because it was a different time of the year. And I was like, damn, like, I didn't, now I know. Like, now I know, like, hey, when I want that shot and it works now, I got to do that right away. But going back, it's, when you find that person that can take photos without the the necessary guidance of, like, this is how I want it to look, like, almost like over micromanaging, that it makes a tremendous difference. And then you get the consistency across brand, like your entire website, all the projects they all relate to each other.
Well, I think the biggest thing too is, I mean, Joelle and I, and again, kind of going back to that, we connect on, like, outside of the professional, like, work. And she does a lot of hiking with her husband. She's very outdoorsy. And so for us, we went to coffee before we started working together, but she was the first photographer, the only photographer that I've done work with on Lawless stuff. And when we went, it just working with her, it's really easy. We sync well. And I think too, when you get into that, when you also started working with someone, you don't feel like if you're suggesting something like you're stepping on their toes or it's like awkward. Like, and there's a lot of times where, again, you might see something in person. I have this vision for, oh, I really want to photograph this specific area and I want it framed like this. And she'll kind of be like, I don't know if that's going to work. And she'll frame it up and I'll be like, oh, I don't like that. That doesn't look how I envisioned it because your eye sees something different than a photo. And so that's
Right.
why having that photographer who you guide them with what you want, but then they give their expertise, I think is really essential.
Yeah, I just, in general, going back to um, early days in your career, like rendering projects too. It's the same thing with that. So something I wanted to touch on that front is, you know, one of the frustrating, especially when you first start, one of the frustrating things is that even when you do get that job that you're excited to photograph in the end, it's a year, 2 years, sometimes even longer than that before it's actually photographed and you're able to share and use it as your portfolio. So one of the things that we started to implement, just a little like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years at this point ago, was that when we sign a contract for a project, we're going to pay to have it rendered. We're going to have some views rendered and
Mm.
share what the project is going to be. And the reason we do this is there's a handful of things. Number one, we print them out big, we put them on the job site, and then when you're on the job site, everyone that's on that job site understands what the end goal is. Where it's like, the guy that's framing that wall, like he just thinks he has to frame a wall. He has no idea why it's being framed a particular way. But that rendering, he's like, oh man, like now I get it. There's actually a gap there for the HVAC or whatever, like who knows, right? And it allows the entire team to get on board with the end vision. But also, like, we take that and then use it for marketing, where it's like, hey, this project's under construction. Like if you go to our website, there's 2 projects on there that say under construction. These are photo renderings.
Mhm.
And then you get to go back to our channel or social media, or YouTube, whatever, and see the projects being unfolding, but relate to what the end vision is, and we share that excitement. But you know, and we're honest about it. We're not deceitful. Like, hey, look at this house we built. It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
under construction. But
Yep.
but interestingly, even when you have something under construction and you can talk about like whether it's a house, right? Say it's the first house you're building and you render it. It's like, hey, I'm actively building a house. You probably have a higher chance of someone else coming to you and say, hey, I want to build a house, than if you never built a house before.
Mhm.
And it's in my opinion, it's utilizing the opportunity to jumpstart the promotion of your next step. And that's, from a growth standpoint, like if you're always doing bathrooms and you want to get into whole home renovations and you have one under construction, you can do your best to share the fact that you're doing a whole home renovation, and now you're taking clients that want a whole home renovation, but where's the portfolio piece? It's like,
Yeah.
or what does that home renovation look like? I don't even know what you're trying to accomplish. And of course, like you gotta be able to execute on the work. You can't render it and then do a shit job and then expect someone to be like, yeah, but you said you could build it since you rendered it. I just think it opens up the conversation at an earlier pace, especially when you're early in the career.
I mean, you make a good point too, Nick, that I mean, a lot of times people think that renderings are going to be for their customers, so that they can see what that looks like. But when you get into subcontractors and there's, high level design or details, and not everyone understands what that finished product's going to look like. There's some framers or mechanical subs that maybe they've never walked one of your jobs finished. They
Mm-hmm.
don't, they don't do trim out. And to be able to see what the look you're going for in the overall design, or maybe it's just a helper who's just starting and is relatively green, and they're coming in and they can actually see a finished rendering of what that space is supposed to look like. That may be the difference between them, really executing that design and just kind of going through the motions and not really understanding what they're building.
Yeah. I think that's such a good way to do it. And I feel like a lot when I was in the commercial field, a lot of the hotels and casinos that we did, we would always do renderings, and that was like part of it because they took years to build, and that's kind of the marketing, like, hey, this is the casino we're doing, the hotel we're doing, this is the design of it. And I think that also I think it also facilitates the decisions with the client too. And a lot of clients, like, doing elevations and floor plans and RCPs are great, but a lot of times clients are like, I can't read this, like, I don't know what this is. And so having those 3D models and renderings for them, I think helps understand, oh, this is where that material is going, that's how we're utilizing it, and here's the scale of the space too, I think is really important.
It's just a level of communication too. I just had a designer who sent me an elevation and a floor plan for built-ins, and like, I can only get a price to a certain level of accuracy there because it doesn't have the detail that I need to really go off. Like, I couldn't if I had to build that set of cabinets, I would be making a lot of assumptions myself. And I think that the renderings help take out a lot of those assumptions, to just answer a lot of questions for everyone involved. Even if you do have the ability to read plans, I think that it's just another level of communication that really helps to keep everyone on the same page. So what made you get out of the commercial design?
I think a lot of it, I was really fortunate. I worked for a few different great firms through college and then out of college. I think a lot of it was you're just sitting behind a computer desk all day long. And I got to work on some really cool projects. And I did some stuff at like JFK and Logan and some casinos and hotels around. But it wasn't I don't know, I did not like casinos. It was really good learning experience because there's a lot of detail. And so being really meticulous about documentation and just even knowing there's a lot of ornate design that goes into them. And the aesthetic isn't really the aesthetic that I love and appreciate. There's only so many sparkly wall coverings that you can pick out before the novelty wears off. And I really just started wanting to work with people more. I missed the interaction. When you're doing commercial work, especially big things like that, you're doing most of everything online, and then it's like some design meetings, and they're very impersonal. Like, it's, not someone's home. It's, the decisions aren't always too thought out. They're like, okay, looks good. Like, let's go with it. And so when I was out of college, I started doing e-design because when I got out of college, I realized I had a lot of student loans and I was living in Philly and I didn't know anyone, so I had nothing else to do. Like, I think it's very different when you go from school where had school, I did crew, and then I also worked at the mall after. And then I had no time for anything. And then I get to work and you're working like 7 to 5, 7 to 6 or whatever. And I'm like, what do I do after work? And so I started just doing e-design to help pay for the student loans. And because I just wanted those done. And so I really enjoyed working with people one-on-one and working with people in their homes.
Yeah, I know a lot of the interior design programs are more commercial based.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's space design, office design, which I think it really is a good skill set to have in understanding how a space works. Mm-hmm. And I think that can really transcend into residential design. And obviously the tools and the software and the equipment. But I know a lot of the people that I know who went through like the interior design programs, even at Drexel. My wife went there, and a lot of her friends, they went and they got commercial jobs. They were better paying jobs. Mm-hmm. But within a few years, they were just like, this isn't what I see my life being. And I think that a lot of them have a really high level design taste and a good style. And I think that the commercial design just didn't let them kind of bring out that side of themselves.
That's so true. Like, Endicott was amazing and I loved the school. I learned a lot there, but it was looked down upon if you wanted to go into residential. Mm-hmm. And so I always thought, I never for a day thought that I was going to do residential. I was like, I don't want to work with like people's homes. Like people are going to be mean. That I don't know why I had that connotation with, working with people with their homes, that everyone's going to be mean, but I just never wanted to. And I always thought I was going to just work my way up through the commercial field. And then it's not as creative as residential. I think there's a lot of technical skills, and I think it's also easier. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. I think it's easier to go from commercial to residential than go from residential to commercial. I think there's
Absolutely.
it's a lot more technical with the commercial. And so I think that was good to have that skill set to then bring me into the residential field. And we still do some commercial work. It's small boutique stuff. It's nothing near what I used to do, but I think it's a good foundation.
Yeah, and I think if you're in residential design, right, if somebody's hiring you, they're hiring you because of your design sense, because of your personality, kind of for this entire aura that you put out, you personally. And I think when you're on the commercial side, you're just one piece of this puzzle, and it's typically not, hey, let's bring Hannah's company in because like we really love their design sense and style. It's like, no, they have the manpower to get this done on time and on budget. And I think that the residential side, really, your customers are hiring you. And I think on the commercial side of things, typically they're hiring you for other reasons. What were you going to say, Nick?
I was going to relate back to, my experience in commercial. I feel the same way, where being able to be in a project management role in the commercial side for a big firm taught me a lot about how to, like, what has brought me into, not brought me into residential, but now that I'm in residential, there's a lot of things I've taken from that, where it's like, and a lot of processes and operating procedures and, documents and document control, where it's like if I had been in residential, I feel like I would, to go into commercial, it'd be like, why do I need all this documentation? Why do I need to be doing formal RFIs and submittals? And it made me value that, because it was so required, because everything was so big. Like the dollar values were so big. Contractual documents, like, has that opened my eyes to a whole different world. Because prior to that, I worked for my dad, and we were in residential fence. He was a residential fence contractor, and the contracts were like a single page document. Like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how much it's going to cost, and I don't know when I'm going to show up, but I'll show up at some point. And now it's, we have a 40-page document that we sign, and it's, but it's all been, through learning through the commercial side. So I think you're right. I think there's enormous value in starting there, especially if you're going to get into residential and own your own business.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think a big thing too is the companies I worked for were architecture firms, and they had a very small interiors department. And with that, I was always working with architects who taught me a lot, and I learned a lot about like different building things and why we're doing that. And I think that was really helpful experience. And then because it was a small interiors department, there was so much work. And so I got a lot of great opportunities at such a young age that I would never have gotten if I worked for a big firm. This company was like 100 people, and they had, I think, like 7 or 8 offices around the country. And so I got these awesome opportunities because, I mean, there wasn't a lot of people, and, you have to learn. And I think that was really cool, which is why I loved working there. I learned a lot in a short period of time, but I just realized it wasn't, I couldn't see myself living that lifestyle too. I saw everyone going into the office every day, go in at 7, you leave at like 8. And I'm a really big family person. And growing up, my parents, my brother and I always played sports, and my parents and my grandparents always went to all of our games, and my family always had family dinners. And so that was something that I knew going in when, Mike and I were eventually going to get married. And when we have kids, like, I want that life too. And so how do I get that life? And so I started realizing I'm not going to get that working at a commercial design firm. I got to make that for myself.
Yeah, obviously looking into the future is very important with that. There's just so many differences with the commercial and the residential, but as you said, I think it is very important to have that experience. And I think, if I'm going to hire a designer for my house or for a project, and I have the option of somebody who went to schooling, even if it was commercial based, and then has residential experience, I'm going to lean that way rather than somebody who, went to school for something else or was a stay-at-home mom for a certain amount of years, and then they realized they had good design sense, and now they have a design company where I think, you're invested, you committed to this, you did the proper schooling, and you paid your dues and put your time in, and whether you're using that commercial aspect or not, it just seems to me that you're committed and you're all in on this, and that's important to me, and I think that that's really important with design and how easy it is to kind of be a designer these days, where I want somebody who has credentials and who did go to school and who has invested a ton of time and money into this, and that might be the same thing, Nick, is hiring a project manager, where it's like, I want somebody who's formally educated in this, and also has the experience. It's not just one or the other for me.
What is that, Hannah, for you? We asked this question before, but the interior designer term can mean so many things to so many different people. And, if you ask any grumpy old builder, you're going to say, well, she's just, he or she is just a decorator. That's all they do. And we had this conversation with Michael Frizzoco a couple episodes ago about, formal training and what that means and why that is so important. But for you, coming out of commercial, starting your own business, and then tying it, back to what the things that mean the most to you from health and wellness, what does interior design mean for you? Like, what is your firm, how does your firm operate, and what are the things that, you feel as though credits you that term?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I try to look at things holistically and look at a project not just from one different element, but, multiple elements. And I think it's really important to, first off, just have a conversation with the person that you're designing for and get to know the person. And when I have a consultation with a potential client, I just want to hear about them and their lifestyle, what they do for work, how they spend time at their home, what they like to do for hobbies. Because in the back of my head, I'm starting to think, when we are walking through the space, how we're going to utilize that. It's not just about making things look pretty. I think a lot of people can do that. And I think it's, it's not hard to make something look nice, but it needs to be functional for the person and also evoke them and their lifestyle. And I think that's what makes a good interior designer, is taking what people are saying, but then also taking what they're not saying and translating that into their home where it fits the client exactly how it should.
So where do you draw the line, or how do you delineate between kind of what you want for a space, what you feel in a space, and trying to figure out what that customer needs, where you're not just like putting what you want on their agenda?
I think that's evolved over the years, because when you start out, you kind of have to do what other people want. But I think over the years, people come to you because they see your work and they see what you can do, and clients start to trust you more. And so now clients are like, what would you do here? What would you see here? And the way that I try to look at it is, and I think a lot of times too, clients come to us because of a certain aesthetic, and they want something that's a little bit more of like that organic, modern look that we bring. But I think that there's a juxtaposition of the expertise that comes from me, but then thinking about what the client is going to need. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's what's going to work best for you. I just had a client who we were going through, there's an entryway and there's two different details we're thinking about for these custom built-ins. And we're thinking, does she want to do cane or does she want to do this fluted wood? And she's like, what one's going to look better? What one's going to be more timeless? And for me, I'm like, I think both are going to look great, but the durability of the fluted wood is going to be better over time, because the caning, while we would back it with a plywood, they have little kids. And so just thinking about kids just coming in, throwing their backpack or whatever on this bench and then having the cabinets behind, I think that's also something to think about with design. Is it might look pretty for a year, but what's it going to look like over the next 5-10 years? Because someone's not going to want to renovate the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And I guess when I look at it kind of with my experience in the industry, it's like you said, when you first come in, you have to do what people want you to do, because you don't necessarily have your own design, your own portfolio. People are probably hiring you because of your price or because you know somebody. It's not like, hey, this is what this person does, we're going to hire them for that. And then you get to a point where you start getting customers that you want, and you have a little more self-confidence, but you're not 100% sure of yourself. And you start, telling people what you should do because this is the right thing to do. And it's almost like you listen to them a little bit less because you feel like you have to put your work out there and you know what's best. And then I think you get to a point where you have enough self-confidence in your work and in your style and in your customer base that you allow the customers to kind of come back into the mix some, where it's like, hey, you want to do that. Maybe stylistically it's wrong or functionally it's wrong, but how can we work together to get what you want and still be able to do this right? Where, 5 years ago, it'd be like, no, that's wrong. We're not doing that because I'm not going to put my name on it. And I feel like I'm kind of back at the position now where it's like, hey, I understand this is what you want. How can we make this work so that it's still right? My name's going to be on it, but you're getting what you want in the mix. And it's been an interesting evolution to kind of see. And I guess that's where my question's coming from, where you're delineating like your style and what you want for yourself, what's right and what the customer wants. It's like, I feel like you're always kind of tiptoeing on either side of that fence.
Yeah. And I think also too, like, a client's not going to come to me saying, I want this really brightly colored, crazy design, because that's just, when you look at our portfolio, that's not what we do. And not to say, like, if someone came to me, I'd probably just say, not like I'd say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'd say, I'm not the right person for you. Mm-hmm. And I can appreciate those spaces and I think they're beautiful, but that's not necessarily the work that I want to do. I want to do spaces that are timeless, and I'm not a big trendy designer. I don't want something to be the trendy color of the year. Then you come to me next year and absolutely hate it. I think sustainability is really important with design. And so having these spaces that are that evolve over time, where you can design something and then maybe over the years throughout you curate some other items and kind of mix in things throughout the time, I think is really important than just designing something and then 3 years later saying you completely hate it. And, that was, looks exactly like 2022,
So where do you think you're pulling your design inspiration from? Obviously, if it's timeless, there's probably some more classic elements to that. But where do you look for inspiration in the type of design that you do?
I mean, everywhere, honestly. I think with timeless too, I think there can be a lot of timeless elements even with modern design, because you look at like the different lines or the different materials. I think it just depends on, like, I love using organic materials like natural stones, woods, things like that, a lot of like greenery. And I like using a lot of like earth tones, like muted, neutral colors, I think is something that is just going to always look nice, and that's something that resonates with me. So throughout the projects, we have a lot of the consistency of the same materials and color tones.
Yeah, that's something I know my wife forever has just never wanted, like super bold, saturated stuff. And I guess initially I was like, everything just seems somewhat bland, and then the more I've been around it and the more I see, I'm like, okay, I completely understand this. Like, there's just no need to make that much of a statement with this heavily saturated color or texture, where I think that you can have this, like I said earlier, this entire understated beauty and elegance where everything's playing together and there's not like one thing that stands out. Like accent walls. Let's talk about accent walls. Whoever the heck invented an accent wall is like my nemesis.
It's also a pain in the ass to paint. It's like that inside corner. It's like
it's so bad.
It's like where
why?
do you how do you get that thing straight? You know?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it just looks not thought through. Like, oh, we need to make a focal point, so let's just slap a different color on. Yeah, I think with neutrals, I think the way to add in depth and contrast is through mixing materials and textures. You know, you get something like you bring in different wood tones and you bring in different fabrics, and you know, I think that's the way to kind of make something more dimensional is through the textures and materials.
Is the health and wellness, like, is that led you to the more natural materials, or and because like I think about I'm very similar in the sense I love natural stone. Like my wife, we're in the process of designing our renovation, and the other day she was like, "What are we gonna do for countertops?" And like without even taking a breath, I was like, "Marble." She's like, "What?" I'm like, she's like, "What? We're not gonna talk about it?" I'm like, "You just asked what we were doing, so I answered you." I was like, I would go for marble. She's like, "Why?" I'm like, I appreciate the natural stone. Like, people don't like it because, oh my gosh, it's gonna stain. It's like, yeah, if you're an asshole about it and don't clean up your wine, like, you know, wipe it up. It's, you know, and especially if you protect it well. But the other side of it, it's like that's the beauty in it.
Exactly.
And frankly, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, frankly, like quartz, you know, they can say all they want that it's, you know, maintenance free, super easy. I stain the crap out of my white quartz countertops, and it's like, and it's harder to clean.
Can't wait to see how your marble's gonna look.
You know what I did is I took the grates off my stove, and I put them on the white countertop, and like the cast iron, like yeah. So it was a pretty stupid move, but marble I could have polished out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you look at these 100-year-old buildings and they have marble floors or marble countertops, the patinaing of it just brings out character.
Yeah, no one goes in there and be like, oh
cool.
man, those need to be cleaned. It's like, no, like, they're honed because they were installed polished. And
but that's how everything ages together at the same time. Like if you put in a quartz, right, and then 15 years later, everything's beat up and the quartz still looks like mint. Yeah. It's like, wait, do you guys just replace your countertops?
Nah, that quartz, man, maintenance free.
But you know what? Because I have clients who want quartz because of the kids. And that's something where I feel like that's usually the biggest like thing where I always want to use natural stone. I'm not going to force a client to. I tell them the pros and cons to both, and they make the decision. But you know, because a lot of times people don't want to have the maintenance of marble. And for me, if I get a turmeric stain or whatever stain on it, to me, I don't really care because I think that ages. I've had clients that just want to get the quartz because of the maintenance, because they're big into cooking.
Totally.
But I've also had a client where their daughter took a knife and just chiseled out a chunk of the quartz. And that's something, if that was marble, I mean, obviously it's not great, but it wouldn't have looked as aesthetically bad or just bad in general. Maybe you could have polished some of it out, but it just would have been like, oh, there's a chip in it. Like, oh, that's, you know, it's a natural stone. But with quartz, it looked awful, you know?
Yeah, it's something that I feel like you come in there with the argument to go natural, and if you get shut down, there's no changing. It's like, you know,
it's not something I push, but also I think I've been using soapstone quite a bit. There's a local company up in Vermont that I've been using, and it's a really cool material. And I think it gives a different look for clients. It is a little bit more maintenance because you have to oil it a couple times a year, but I think a lot of times clients don't know what else to get. It's like two things, like quartz or marble. I mean, there's other things out there that we can use too. So introducing another material for them, even quartzite, you know, is a little bit more maintenance free than marble. But I think there's also just the thing with quartz, like there's so many different companies and there's a lot of bad quartz out there.
Well, you're absolutely right. And what it comes down to is the manufacturing process. And it's, you know, it's not it's not a healthy material to manufacture. And, there's a lot, like, you think of silica, like it's filled with silica.
Yep.
And it's not that, oh my gosh, I'm putting a silica slab in my house, but, the manufacturing process, it's really important. Like the health of those people that are manufacturing. And I was going to ask you, like you mentioned Rubio earlier, which is like, a more, friendly material to finish wood in. And if you talk to Alan, who is the sales rep around here, he'll tell you that he's drank it before to prove how healthy it is.
Okay.
Yes, I know. He was at the airport and they wouldn't let him get on the flight unless they proved that it wasn't flammable, and he drank it. He told me this story, and I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell that, so who knows. But my point this is not sponsored by Rubio, guys. Rubio, I'm definitely getting an email after this.
Excuse me, Nick.
My question is like, how, are you doing that research? Like when you talk about these materials, like, are you going to that level of understanding, not only what this material is, for face value, but what it took to get here? When you talk about like more sustainable products, are you at the point where you're considering like carbon neutral products and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something what's cool about sustainability, there's always so much to learn about it.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've definitely been diving into more when you said the silica with the quartz. Like I was actually just listening to a podcast about that the other day. And I think it's really important where it's not just about what you're putting into your home, but it's how it got there, and also thinking about the workers and the people involved in manufacturing that stuff too, because it might be a very low level in your home, but that low level is how many more times prominent in a manufacturing facility. And so I think with sustainability, there's so many different things than just saying, oh, is this like an eco-friendly material or something like that? There's so many other elements to that, or like supporting local, thinking about the community, or, a lot of other things that are important too.
This is completely off topic, but you were talking about Rubio.
Yeah.
So I have this boot polish, and it's supposed to be, I don't know, I got it a few years ago. It's for work boots, and it's supposed to be, I'd have to look up the brand of it, Obenaufs or something, but it's supposed to be for firefighters that like go out in the forest and fight forest fires. And it's like an oil that you put on your boots that keeps the leather supple through like the harshest. And I'm pretty sure it's very close to Rubio. Like it smells the same. It looks the same. And like the first time I used Rubio, I was like, this reminds me of something. And I was like, it's my boot oil. And I put some boot oil on like next to Rubio on the wood, and it's very close to the same stuff.
Can you drink it?
Funny. Yeah.
I can try. I mean,
no, please, no one out there drink Rubio.
I'm sure you can if you're putting it on your boots. It makes for a lovely poop. It's beautiful.
We decided to go with Rubio because it has no VOCs, and I think that was a huge thing, and especially a lot with majority of our clients have young kids or animals, and so not just thinking about yourself, but thinking about the other, like we have Kona with us, our dog, every weekend. And so if we were staining or putting poly over stuff, like he's not wearing a respirator, and I think it's just really important to think about the materials that you're putting into your house and that whole wellness factor. There's a lot of health issues that can go into VOCs with respiratory issues and stuff like that. And so it's more expensive for sure, but also the monocoat was another big thing with that. There was a lot of different elements, I think, with wanting to go with Rubio. One, Mike's worked with the product a lot because he makes a lot of furniture with it. And then two is a monocoat, so you're only putting it over once. And I think the other thing too is because we are going to be renting it, just thinking about the durability. And if there was ever like a dent or scratch or something like that, you can just sand it out and then put it right over, and you're not having the stain lines or whatever. It's easy.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice product to work with. There's a few of them out there. I know, Nick, you've used them on like hardwood floors as well. I've done one.
Yeah.
It was a different product than that. I was skeptical of it the first time. So we just did like a natural, I forget the brand. we used and like how little you used of it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been back to the house like years later and it's still holding up very well.
I think the thing that, that's oftentimes hard to get over is like it feels like there's nothing on the wood.
Yeah.
Where it's like if when it's all dry and like you close your eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell what's bare wood and what has a finish on it. Where, when you do a polyurethane or, any of these other, like a lacquer, like it has like a film to it. So it feels, oh, that's done. Like that has basically a filler on top of it that, spreads out and creates this film. And that's been that's, I think, something that people struggle to get over. And even on floors, we did a walnut floor, all character grade, all Rubio, and it was beautiful. But it's when you get down and touch it, it's like, man, that feels like there's nothing on the floor. But that's that's the appeal. Like a lot of people like that, or those that appreciate what Rubio is, or any of these. I think in the shop here we use Rubio, but we also have used Odie's oil, and it's similar.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think I like the matte version, like the matteness of it too. I'm not a big like glossy, sheen person, and Mike and I both like the finish on it. Tyler, it's funny you made a comment about using you only need a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made that mistake last weekend.
It's crazy how far it goes.
So, I felt so bad. I think Mike wanted to kill me, but so I started mixing, and we're mixing two different colors, and I had done a bunch of test sampling beforehand, or so I thought I got the right color. So I was like, it's 4 parts pure, 1 part chocolate. So I start going and we start mixing it, and Mike goes to put it on the wood, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is way too dark. I'm like, I got to put more pure in. So I start putting more pure in. By the end, I'm dumping the whole 1.3 liter can in, and Mike's looking at me like wide-eyed, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, this is going to cover so much. And it was already pretty late. Like, I think we started maybe at like 4 or something, and we have this whole bucket of
Do you
Rubio.
have like the catalyst in this one too, or no?
The like the accelerator?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
God.
See, I wasn't smart.
because you can skip that, right? I think you can skip it, yeah.
And then it won't harden because you have to use it within 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
So
there goes our
being
night.
Smart, I should have mixed the color, then put the accelerator in. But I thought that
You were confident. Yeah.
I was so confident. But before, when I was sampling, I wasn't measuring. I think that's the thing. It's like when I'm cooking, I don't measure. I just kind of eyeball it. Here, I was like, oh, let me measure because it's definitely 4 to 1. It definitely wasn't. I think we did it out. It's like 10 to 1. I was very off. Like not even close.
So you're a good cook, but not a good baker. Because baker,
Exactly.
like,
Oh my gosh, yes.
like my
Mike
wife,
is the baker.
my wife will just like toss it. I'm like, Meg, you can't. I mean, I have no room to talk. But I'm like, I think you have to like measure this out and like use a knife to like screed off the top
It's
of
like
the
a
cup.
science.
It's like
Yeah.
very much science. And then when it doesn't
Mike's
come
the
out right,
engineer.
it's like right.
Yeah, so he's the engineer, so he's the baker, and he's really good at baking, and he's like precise. And when
Yeah.
I bake, I'm just like throwing things in.
Yeah.
So when we're doing the Rubio, we were doing the whole loft, and we were doing everything that we sanded down to 220, like the hallways and ceilings and stuff like that. It was like 11 o'clock at night. By the time we finished, I felt so bad. We didn't use all of the Rubio before it was like hardened and wouldn't work because I just poured too much.
Yeah, it's insane how far it goes. Where the first floor we did, I'm like, really? That's all? I'm like, I'm gonna be in the middle of this floor and need to order more.
Mm-hmm.
And nope, we had like a full can of it left over too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just get the floors are nice because you use like a basically a metal straight edge and just drag it back and forth. Hannah, wait till you have kids and you're making a bottle. You're gonna be the one with the scoop. You're not measuring the scoop.
Yeah.
You're just throwing scoops in. Mike's gonna be sitting there like screeding off every scoop, making sure it's 2 scoops per 1 ounce of water, or no, I'm sorry, 2 ounces per scoop, whatever it is. But I remember I did the same thing. I was like screeding it off, and Meg's like, Nick, you don't have to do that. Like if it's a little bit more of a milkshake, it's not a big deal. It's like it's totally fine.
It's funny because Mike and I are so similar, but so different, like just complete opposites on everything, but like values and work and like things like that. We couldn't be farther from, farther from being the same.
So what is it?
Rachel has trouble with the whole baking. It's just like, it's a joke at this point, but it's like any time that she bakes, she messes something where it's like if it says 2 eggs, she puts in 3, or she'll put in 1, and then it's like she doesn't ever gauge before she starts to cook it.
It's like, oh, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's like, this seems different than last time, but like you make the same pancake mix every time, and like now it's like soup rather than pancake batter. And then she's like, I think I messed something up this time. And we know and we laugh about it now, but it's the same thing. Like baking, I'm like, Rach, you can't deviate from that. It's not like I think it needs a pinch more of this. No, that's the way that it has to be.
I got 2 very random stories related to this. I remember my mom sent me out for groceries once, gave me a list, and on the list said 3 bananas. And I'm in the fruit aisle. I'm like, 3? There's no way she only wants 3. So I got 3 bunches. I was like, there's no, like, who wants 3 bananas? Like, they're not sold individually. Come to find out they are. And then fast forward to when Meg and I were newly married. I think I was making salsa or something, and she was like, oh, put all this stuff in a bowl and I'll handle the rest of it. And one of it was black beans. And she's like, and she wrote it probably 6 times. Make sure you strain the black beans. And I opened the can and I dumped black beans into the salsa, and we're eating. No, I'm sorry, it was chili. That's what it was. She was like, put the black beans in the chili.
I was wondering. I was like, what kind of salsa is
No, it was chili. And we were eating it, and Meg's like, you didn't strain the black beans. I'm like, and I knew I didn't. I was like, yeah, I did. She's like, Nick. I'm like, I definitely didn't. She goes, this is disgusting. I'm like, you're absolutely right. I dumped, a cup of black bean juice into your chili.
Oh my God.
So Hannah, what is your? I feel like most interior designers have a handful of pet peeves that they just like can't stand with design. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but there's got to be some.
Oh, I got a few.
Oh, she's prepared. I love it.
Well, I will say, okay, so trends. I cannot stand when people do the whole like, oh, this is out, this is in kind of thing, because if someone likes something, then who's to say that they can't have it in their home, and they shouldn't. Yeah. And so I think it's thinking about what you want to have in your home and what makes you happy. I think another thing, my handyman will know this for sure, is window treatments. Getting them at the right height so that they touch the floor and they're not hanging a little above. Because I think 2 big things that can make a huge difference in a home are curtains and rugs. When you have too small of rug in a space, it just looks awkward, and the scale's not right, and the space just feels weird and not grounded. And then with the window treatments, the window treatment, same thing. I think those are 2 things that I really like clients to invest in, getting like the right size, and getting custom window treatments, I think, is really nice, because they just make the space so much better.
It's funny. I always think of like window treatments almost like a suit, where it's like you got to get the break right. Where on like a good suit, if it's got to just hit the shoe. Like if it's too baggy, it looks like it was too long, and if it's too high, well, probably in trend right now, but won't be in 2 years or whatever. But those 2 things, like what you just said, like specifically around window treatment, that I feel like is one of the biggest things, like that is undervalued in projects when it comes to design, where it's like you don't realize how much of an impact that can make, and
how much of a budget that can eat up.
Yeah.
But also on the contrary, like you can do it fairly inexpensively. If it like you if you're doing it. If you're
Nick's fairly inexpensive is different than most people's fairly inexpensive. Because any job I've ever put in window treatments, even when they're not even nice, I'm like, I can't believe that these cost this much.
People keep calling me the bougie builder, and I'm like, all right, maybe I am a little bit bougie, but
they just seem expensive to me.
I mean, I guess if you're making them yourself and buying all the fabric and selling them.
Definitely not doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, fine. They're expensive, guys. Window treatments are expensive. You heard it here first.
Custom window treatments are not. They're not cheap.
But I think that
they're worth it.
They're worth it. Yeah, and
but
you can also.
But they're not cheap.
I think about, our house now, where it's like one of the things that my wife and I are talking about is like putting up window treatments temporarily. Number one, because she likes it pitch dark and in the night, and I don't care about it. But you can also kind of fake what that room might look like, where it's like it's got these two awkward little windows. But if you do the window treatments right, you can kind of fake the fact that like you diffuse the light across, a sheer curtain rather than just like this tiny little window that's on the wall randomly in the corner. And there's opportunities there to I mean, my point is not to necessarily fake something, but the opportunity is that you can really change or transform a room with subtle things like expensive window treatments.
Yeah. But I also think there's a point too with you saying that they're worth it. I think there's certain things that figuring out what's worth it for you.
Yeah.
And those investment pieces, like a lot of times they're sofas or dining tables, window treatments can be a big investment. And every person's a little bit different. I feel like a lot of times I get clients who, ask about budgets and want to know like how to allocate the money. And a lot of that, we can drive some of that, but I think it also depends on what do you really love and what do you value. And I have clients who love artwork and they want to get like cool local artists and get more of those pieces. I have other clients that's not something that they care about. Maybe they care about having a nice vintage rug or, a really nice dining table for entertaining.
Yeah, I think that, Nick, you should just go with paper until you get your house done.
The paper window treatments?
Yeah,
love
with the
those.
little clips.
Yeah, the little paper clips that hold them up. I don't think they would survive. My kids would draw on them.
That's all right.
Now it's artwork.
It's just temporary.
Yeah.
It's going to diffuse the light a certain way. All right, so what else? There's no other ones where you're like, I see this all the time and I don't know why people do it?
I mean, honestly, I think just another thing is just like being wasteful. I think that's like a big pain point for me. When people want to renovate a home, just thinking about properly like disposing of things, whether it's giving it to friends or family, or maybe your neighbor wants something. Selling it on Facebook Marketplace, I think, is a great thing now for people. Habitat for Humanity takes a lot of things too, I think is nice. I think people's first reaction a lot of times is to throw something away.
Yeah.
But I think, just trying to give something a new life, I think is just nice because maybe you don't want it, but someone else will.
I think it's the convenience factor. I follow this girl who's local. She's a professional organizer. And she, on her story today, she was doing a pantry over, and she went through and they went through all the food, figured out what was expired and got rid of that, but found food that they weren't going to use, and she took the time to bring it to the shelter or
That's
to
awesome.
a food pantry. And it's like, I know if I was cleaning out my pantry, that stuff would end up in the trash because there's a bag sitting next to me. And I can tie it up and I can throw it in a container and it's gone. And it's wasteful. And, I'm thankful now where, in my business, it's like I have Brian, who's a site super on our Rhode Island project. He doesn't even have a dumpster on the job site because he wants to be so cautious of what is leaving that job site and figure out, like, can it be repurposed? He's got a guy that comes and picks up all the metal and all the cardboard. And he's like,
That's
and then all the wood
That's
he's
cool.
got organized by size. So if someone needs a block, he goes out and grabs the blocking out of that pile.
I saw that on your stories. You have like instead of just getting like a new board or whatever, like looking to save. That's awesome, and that saves you money too in the end.
And it's like, and then he's got a container. It's like, this is for food trash. It's like if you anything lunch cups, all that goes in there. He ties that bag up and drops it in our shop dumpster once a week. And it's just when the difficult thing is convenience. But I think that the more awareness that becomes around it, just like, buying a product that, I want to go back to what you said about like the human investment. Like if people knew the human investment it took to produce some of these products, like, hey, it's a great product now, but like, do you know what that's doing to this culture or this country? Like, or how it's produced with this, this labor force, like, and what it's doing to, like, if people knew of it and were aware of it, our patterns and our habits would change. It's the same thing with disposal. And it's like, being able to, repurpose and reuse and recycle. Like, I think that I think it's very much, unfortunately, on trend, but also like a lot of people are faking it, where it's like there are companies out there that, they're claiming that they're repurposing or reusing this stuff, and they're not. They're just, they're selling it and getting the points on some sort of program that they've signed up for and get a rebate back on. And that's unfortunate. Where it's
yeah, there's a lot of greenwashing that can happen, and there's products too when you like, you might see like, and not every company does this at all, but I've seen some companies where they say, oh, our products are made from recycled water bottles, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. But then you look into it, and they're new water bottles that were made specifically. They're not repurposed water bottles that had been recycled before. And so I think it's just taking the time to just with any product. I mean, and this is where this has evolved for me over the years. I wasn't always into sustainability or just even like non-toxic products for our home, but just taking a little bit of time to research a company or a product before you buy it. I mean, it can take a few minutes. And I think companies that are transparent about things, it's nice to start investing in companies that have the same values as you. A couple of years ago, Mike and I just stopped our Prime membership from Amazon, and we were just like, you know what, we want to support local companies. And I think it's been a lot better. I mean, like, yeah, the convenience of having Amazon 2-day shipping is awesome, but I think it's nice to just be able to support people that you might actually know. You might go, into town and know these people and want to buy from them, or knowing local shops, especially with interior design. It's nice to buy from smaller companies because you build a relationship with them too, and it's always nice to see that.
Yeah. I mean, to speak specifically to that, it's also, again, the convenience side. You probably don't buy as much. Where it's like, if I have the ability to get something in 2 days, I'm going to buy it. Where it's like, if I had to go to the store and think about it and then buy it, I probably wouldn't. And that should right then and there tell you probably don't need it. And it's like, I think about our kids, where it's like we every time they go to the store, they come back with a new piece of crap toy. And it's like, I get it. Like, in the moment, they were probably screaming and being terrible, and like this was the way to keep them quiet. But our house is filled and littered with these toys that are unfortunate. Like, they're just a piece of crap. They're not going to last through the week. And it's like,
we used to get sticks when I was little.
Yeah.
Go out back and get a new stick. Or like an old cardboard box. It'd be like, oh, you could play with the cereal box.
Right. But yeah,
it is. It's on that note, junk, where the toys that they have now, I don't understand. They get these like balls that you unpack, and there's junk in them that like doesn't make sense to me. Or they're little miniature dot. Like, have you ever walked through the toy aisle in Target or something like that recently? I don't even understand the toys today. I'm like, yo, when I was little, I just wanted to play with Matchbox cars, and we already said Playmobil, Legos, stuff like that. And now it's just junk. Like, it's all throwaway garbage and consumable. And I try not to let my kids have that many toys and indulge in that, because I don't see any value in that to them.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that we live in such a wasteful society, but it's cool to talk to you, Hannah, just about design, but also how like you relate it back to, someone's life. And I think that, I can only imagine how successful that you are now, and you'll continue to be, because you've made such an effort to relate that, and beyond just what it looks like, but truly, what it feels like, and what it makes someone feel, how it makes someone feel in that space. Whether it's more comfortable, more homey, more safe feeling. Like, there's all these scenarios where when a space is designed well and really thoughtful and intentional, it does make a huge impact on someone's life.
Yeah, and I
definitely.
think even going out on a limb and kind of digging your heels in and having that be such a driving force in your business and your design, I mean, props to you, because I think starting a relatively new business, a lot of times people are just looking for work and looking for customers. And I think that, having that mindset, there's a lot of customers who aren't going to want to use you, or who want something that's more convenient, or something that's faster, or more generic, more commercialized. And I think, sticking to your guns and really finding the customers that you want to be able to do the designs that you want and design things the way you want is also, that's something that I believe in, and something that, you should be proud of.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of being proud of, congratulations on your recent award. Was it 5 under 40?
Yeah, thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was not expecting it, so I was very excited. Yeah.
That's very cool. Hannah, where can people learn more about you, your firm, what you do? Where can they read your blog?
Lawless_design.com. I actually just recently got the Lawless Design domain, so I need to update my website. Finally was able to purchase that. And then my Instagram is lawless_design.com. And yeah.
Very cool. Before we go, what does Lawless mean?
It's a family name, actually.
Oh.
It was my great grandmother's maiden name. And so when I was doing my business, I wanted something personal, but not my name, essentially.
Like it.
Yeah, heard Lawless and thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like rebel. So
it is, and I think it's like fitting for our firm and our mission. So I thought it was a cool name.
Awesome. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for being on. Appreciate it. Congrats again on the award and all your success.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Talk soon.
You
Awesome.
You can just click out of the window and it'll save everything on our end.
Hannah, thank you so much.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you guys. This was fun.
You're awesome. Talk to you soon.
Good luck with sanding.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can't wait for the weekend.
I'll be watching. So if you guys aren't following her on Instagram, you should follow her. This cabin sanding project has been going on for weeks. It's just, I text her every week. I'm like, you guys are crazy. And she's like, yeah, I know. I want to say she might have bought a Festool, but I was like, that's a perfect job for a Rotex or a.
Okay, so it's like V-groove that they're sanding.
Yeah.
It's not actual logs.
No, oh my gosh.
Because that's what I was imagining. I'm like, they have to hand sand.
Oh no, I think logs. You probably blast it with like walnut shells or something.
I don't know.
Or just not. Because that's what ours is. Ours is all logs, but it's, you know what? I think hers is a log cabin, but they machine the V-groove on the inside, like the backside of the log. Because ours is a rough sawn square interior.
Yeah.
So it is still the log. So it's probably like a manufactured log.
Yeah. I mean, I know Rachel, sometimes even on Rachel's parents' cabin, there's even sections of it that they've put V-groove, like in the kitchen so they can hang the cabinets and stuff like that where it transitions. But it is traditional log throughout most of it. Mm-hmm. And that's where my head is. I'm like, how are they sanding all of that? Because most of it would be hand sanding.
Yeah. That'd be brutal.
I mean, it still would be brutal regardless.
Yeah. All right, guys.
I would probably turn the house on its side and then hire like a floor sub to sand it.
Dude, I've had floor subs. We had them refinish a table that was all white oak, and they threw their floor sander up on it. And just,
really?
Yeah, like one of the circular sanders. I forget what they're called.
Trio or whatever. Yeah.
And
I mean, I've had them do porches and stuff like that.
Totally, yeah.
But
yeah. Previously we've been talking about how we want to give away some merch. First off, there is a merch site. I'm actually going to put it up on our Instagram page, so there'll be a link in bio for merch if you guys want to buy some merch. But we talked about if you leave a review that we would send out merch, but we didn't have a good way to get in contact with you guys. So going forward, if you leave a review, make sure you tag your handle in the review on Instagram, so that way we can come back and DM you. And this week we got South Coast Dad, and he writes, okay, so after continuing listen, I have been down a rabbit hole after rabbit hole into building science, architectural design, down to the finishing details like tile setting, trim carpentry, and painting. And between these guys and their guests, I have completely reset my theories about how a house can be built versus how it should be built. A lot of the nuggets I've learned from these guys and their guests have made a major impact in my selection of a home builder for my family's home build. With what I've learned and continue to learn from this podcast, I've been able to have a much higher level of involvement with my home designer and builder as we prepare for a home build. Started listening to this podcast because building has always interested me, and I keep coming back to see how far this rabbit hole goes. Much love, at South Coast Dad. So I'm going to DM you, South Coast Dad, and we will get you some merch. We'll get your information and send you something out. If you guys want an opportunity at merch, definitely drop us a review on iTunes with a 5-star review. Would appreciate it. I am going to read what he wrote in the end. He did write, P.S. Tell Johnny that I miss hearing him on the podcast. We miss him too. It's unfortunate he had to part ways, but I'm sure we will get that message to him. So South Coast Dad, appreciate you reaching out. We will get you some merch. If you guys are interested, make sure you leave us that review. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork, Reno Run, Rockwool, and Upstate Merch.